The college football season is unfortunately over, and while we're all sad about that, it's never too early to take a look at the next season. We're all looking forward to the next season already since this one is over, and there will be plenty of things that happen between now and then. But for now, we take a way too early look at the top 25 teams for the 2025 college football season. While the Texas Longhorns did not get what they wanted in 2024, this is a team that should be right back in the college football playoff in 2025. The Arch Manning era has begun, and it's an era that's been highly anticipated. This is a guy who has been focused on for most of his career. It really, before he got to Texas, he has been under the spotlight, and he is someone that people have a ton of expectations for. Texas really hopes that he is the real deal because this is, again, an offense that should be really good. Yes, you lose Isaiah Bond, you lose Matthew Golden, but you have guys like DeAndre Moore and Ryan Wingo coming back. The backfield should be absolutely loaded. Jaden Blue, and Trevian Wisner are going to return after a solid season. You obviously want to see them improve, but you also get CJ Baxter back after an injury before the season began. You're really excited about what he brings to the table. Anthony Hill is going to lead what is going to be one of the more exciting defenses in college football. Trey Moore also decided that he's going to return, and they got Travis Shaw from North Carolina in the transfer portal. This is a really good team, a team that's going to expect to play for a conference championship, a national championship in 2025, and it'll be a fun team to watch, and it'll be interesting to see what these new faces can do for this team. Next up, I'm going with the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, there are a lot of things that could change between now and the beginning of the season. The transfer portal still is going to sort itself out, and maybe Georgia looks to add a couple players till the season begins. But this is a team that should be near the top of college football and is going to be a national championship contender. Gunnar Stockton takes over the offense for now. We'll see if they maybe add a quarterback. I don't know. They wanted to get Carson Beck back. Maybe they're interested in someone in the portal or someone who hasn't entered the portal yet. We will see. Oscar Delp returning is huge for this offense. Gives you a reliable player, someone that maybe you try to target a little bit more in 2025. Nate Frazier is a really exciting back, even when you lose Trevor Etienne. Getting Nate Frazier back is a huge weapon for this offense. The defense should be just fine. Yes, you lose guys like Michael Williams. The defensive line is going to have to be retooled, but with the recruiting that Georgia's done, you feel like you're in a good position for the Bulldogs. CJ Allen comes back. He is an absolute stud for this team. I think he's going to be really good in 2025. Dalen Everett, also another exciting player, did some really good work in the transfer portal so far. You bring in Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch. You also bring in Zion Branch, Zachariah's brother, and you feel like you fit some pieces into this passing attack that feel pretty good, that could elevate this group. That was one thing you didn't see a lot of consistency from Georgia this year, was the passing attack. You're hoping that that improves in 2025. Marcus Freeman deserves a lot of credit for the run that he put Notre Dame on this year. The fact that they were able to overcome a loss to Northern Illinois and still make it to the national championship game was exciting by itself. And this is a team that's going to be really fun to watch while he is running the show. You're losing Riley Leonard, so the CJ Carr show apparently will be taking over. We'll see what happens. We'll see what that quarterback battle produces, but there's a lot of hype surrounding CJ Carr. There's a lot of hype surrounding this offense and what it can do, and you obviously would like to see more of a passing attack from this team in 2025. That will make guys like Jeremiah Love's job really, really easy. Jordan Faison is another guy who's going to be really exciting to watch. He was already pretty exciting. You saw some flashes in this Mike Denbrock offense. Again, Notre Dame has done a lot of really good things this year. The defense should still be a really good group. You bring in Devontae Smith from Alabama. You bring in Jalen Stroman from Virginia Tech. You have a number of guys returning despite some of the players that are departing, and you feel like you're in a good position. Notre Dame is playing really good football late in the 2024 season, and they are looking to make a name for themselves in the beginning of the 2025 season. If Ohio State has their quarterback position figured out heading into 2025, they are an extremely dangerous team, even with the players that they lose. Now, the defense is going to have to retool itself a little bit. You feel like you're going to lose some of those key players that made big plays down the stretch. But again, Ohio State, similar to Georgia, has done a really good job of recruiting, bringing in players to fill those positions, and that should be no different in 2025. Jeremiah Smith is the talk of the town. He is someone that's going to be one of the best players in college football. He's going to get a ton of love, a ton of exciting things said about him heading into the season. Carnell Tate is kind of an underrated player. I think that he was an underrated player this year. He did a lot of really exciting things when teams were focusing on Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka, so that's really exciting as well. Caleb Downs returns. He is an absolute force on the defensive side of the ball. CJ Hicks is going to take on a bigger role seemingly in 2025, and the secondary is going to have some new faces as well. Bringing in CJ Donaldson, to me, is still an underrated addition. I don't think a lot of people are talking about that. You think that a lot of people are assuming that TreVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are going to the NFL draft, and no one blames them. So bringing in C.J. Donaldson kind of tells us that too. That is a really good addition. Donaldson is a big physical back, and that helps with a quarterback position that really needs to sort itself out until the beginning of the season. We'll see what happens there, but having Donaldson, that was a huge addition. Max Clare coming in on the offensive side of the ball as well at tight end. That was another good addition for the Buckeyes. The Oregon Ducks, this is another team, and it seems to be a theme right now with these teams so far near the top, is that you don't really know what the quarterback position is going to look like, and that's okay. I think that there's a lot of excitement. You also trust the coordinators. When you look at the teams that we talked about so far, Ohio State's got Chip Kelly. Notre Dame has Mike Denbrock. Georgia, even though you maybe don't feel as good about the offensive coordinator position as you did as the previous guy, you still feel pretty good. And Texas obviously has Sark. Oregon's in the same situation. Will Stein is a phenomenal play caller, someone who is really good at what he does, getting his players open. He is going to do more of the same of that in 2025. Losing Dylan Gabriel was always going to hurt, but they knew that he was a one-year rental essentially, and did a lot of good things for Oregon. Evan Stewart's return was kind of a surprise, but you feel pretty good about getting him back in the wide receiver room. Kenyon Sadiq is another guy to keep an eye on at the tight end position. Losing Terrence Ferguson was always going to be a tough pill to swallow, but you feel like you have a pretty good player in Sadiq, very athletic. Everybody's eyes, though, when you even look at offense, defense, everybody's eyes are on Dante Moore. Is Dante Moore going to take a step? When you watch what he did at UCLA, you saw some potential, and there's been a lot of hype for him coming into the college. Initially committed to the Ducks, signs with UCLA, back with Oregon. We'll see what he can do. You saw some flashes, like I said. You also saw some really bad play from him. He's had time to sit back and watch and learn from Dylan Gabriel. We'll see if that means that he's a better player, and we'll see if that means good things for the Oregon offense. The defense shouldn't take a step back. You lose some key players, and that's to be expected, but you also get Mateo Uiagalelei back. You get Tatum Tuioti. You bring in Dylan Thieneman from Purdue. You also get Theron Johnson, a very underrated corner, very good corner for Oregon, and you bring in certain players that are going to make this offense and defense a lot better and fill some of those positions that you need to fill. Jordan James going out, you bring in Mekhi Hughes, the offensive line gets a boost. You see certain players going to the NFL. Oregon does a really good job of making sure that they are going to compete in the Big Ten, but also for a national championship. While Miami's season didn't end in the college football playoff, this is a team that is determined to get back there and to get into the college football playoff next year. When you look at what they bring back to the table, getting Carson Beck, and honestly right now it feels like things are kind of up in the air with so many of these transfer portal players. You don't exactly know what they're going to do, if they're going to stay, but Carson Beck is coming to Miami, and that's, I think, a good addition. And when you look at what Carson Beck did at Georgia, there are obviously some concerns, but at the same time, there were some games where you saw some really good plays from him. You saw some really good throws, and I think that player is still in him. I think that he still has the ability to make those plays. I kind of like the fit in Shannon Dawson's system better than what we saw at Georgia. I just don't know if Georgia was able to utilize him how they really wanted or didn't really know how to, but we'll see what happens. I like the fit better with Miami than with Georgia, and he's going to have plenty of talent to find it downfield. Mark Fletcher joins him in the backfield. I think this is a player that everyone's expecting to have a breakout season. Same with JoJo Trader. This has been a guy that we've talked about for a couple of years now. Miami fans are ecstatic over what he brings to the table. You also bring a guy like CJ Daniels. You get Alex Bauman from Tulane, both from the transfer portal. So you feel like you're in a good position right now. Some players obviously need to step up, but you still feel like you're in a good position. Ruben Bain Jr., if he can get back to his earlier form, I think that he is going to be an absolute monster. We're going to talk about him as a first-round pick. The defensive line feels like it's going to be pretty good for Miami. Akeem Mesidor is also back. A young player, O.J. Frederick, in the back end at corner. He is a young player, a freshman who stepped up and played really big for this team right away. You bring in Emmanuel Carney from Arizona as well, so you feel like you have a good tandem at corner. We'll see what happens there, but Miami is looking to make it to the college football playoff. They are a team on a mission, and it'll be fun to see what Carson Beck and that offense can do. Clemson surprised a lot of people by making it to the college football playoff, which is a weird sentence to say, but when you watch this year, you didn't really expect them to make it where they did, and they gave Texas a little bit of scare early in that game. So I think this is a team that is definitely capable of getting back. It looks like Cade Klubnik is playing with a ton of confidence. It looks like he's playing a lot better than he did at the beginning of the season or even last year. Jay Haynes takes over as the running back. Antonio Williams is back looking for a 1,000-yard season after coming up short in 2024. The defense feels like it's going to be one of the best units in college football. The defensive line is absolutely stacked. TJ Parker and Peter Woods are back. They bring in Will Helt. They finally used the transfer portal. That's great. They bring in a player like Will Helt. We'll see how good of an addition that is. I think that one of the things we talked about with Clemson was waiting to use the transfer portal, had its, pros and cons. I think right now the hard part is that teams have had years to figure out what player works, what player doesn't, and Clemson is just kind of getting started, so they're almost behind in that way. But Dabo Swinney feels like now he has adapted to the times. It'll take him a little bit of time maybe to see who works and who doesn't and how they evaluate talent. But they did add 3 players. That's really exciting. And it'll be interesting to see if Clemson is going to get back to the top of the ACC and if they're going to be back to competing for national championships. The LSU Tigers are going to have an exciting offense. They're going to have an explosive offense. They will move the ball down the field efficiently. Garrett Nussmeier decided to return instead of going to the NFL. He gets Chris Hilton and Aaron Anderson back. Caden Durham will join in the backfield. The question is going to be for LSU, what kind of defense will we see? This is an offense that was one of the best in college football. They were explosive at times, and I think that towards the end of the season, you saw a group that was playing really well together, especially in the bowl game against Baylor. The defense, though, is really where things are going to be interesting. I think that Whit Weeks is a really fun player to watch. I think you have a number of other players that can step up, and honestly, they played better when you lost a couple of players that maybe you relied on a little bit too much. So if they can be better as a unit, then this group feels pretty good. They also did really good work in the transfer portal. If Nick Anderson can stay healthy, he will be one of the best wide receivers in college football. He is that good. You also bring in Barian Brown, who can help both on offense and special teams, so you feel pretty good about that. A pair of Virginia Tech transfers are going to make instant impacts. Braylon Moore and Manzur Delaney. Those are 2 guys that will step up right away. And Delaney is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. That's a group that obviously needs a little bit of help if you're LSU. And if you can get a defense to step up, you feel like you're in a pretty good position. Penn State's another one of those teams that, that came up short in a big game. They came up short against Notre Dame, didn't quite make it to as far as they wanted to, but they got a taste of the college football playoff. They got a taste of winning in the college football playoff, and they're looking to get back to that point. And a kind of a surprise, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are returning. Same with Drew Allard. That's an offense that obviously needs to figure out how to get the ball going through the air a little bit more efficiently, but you bring in guys like Kyron Hudson and a very underrated transfer in Devontae Ross from Troy. You feel like you got the talent to do it. You have the players. Even when you lose, you're losing 2 of your best wide receivers. You lose Tyler Warren to the NFL. You feel like you're in a good position. If this offense finds balance and Andy Koltnicki finds a little bit of a rhythm, you feel like you're in a pretty good position. Now, maybe you get a little bit less creative than you did when you had Tyler Warren. You maybe don't have that Swiss Army knife. So I feel like we're in a good position if you're a Penn State fan, and this is a group that is going to be exciting if they can put things together offensively. Defensively, losing Abdul Carter wasn't really that surprising. Deni Dennis Sutton is coming back. That's huge. I think that's defensive line is going to have to figure some things out early, but they have the talent, and if there's one team that you really trust to figure things out, even with a new defensive coordinator and a group up front that's going to have some different faces, it's Penn State. A.J. Harris and Tony Rojas on the back end are going to be really fun to watch. Harris had a really good year for Penn State in his first year as a full-time starter, and Rojas, again, The linebackers were really good for Penn State. I thought they played really well, and they were a big reason why they had success. Rojas is going to be one of those guys that contributes for that group as well. They brought in Enai White from Texas A&M. They bring King Mack from Alabama. So you brought in some players that you hope are going to make big-time contributions. Again, this is a team that expects to be in the college football playoff in 2025, and they have the right pieces to do it. Arizona State shocked everyone, and while I think a lot of people think they take a step back in 2025, this is a team that is looking to prove people wrong once again, and they have a good core returning. Sam Leavitt had a big year, 2,800 yards and 24 touchdowns. He was a big reason for their success. Obviously, Cam Scatterbo is going to be a big loss for them, but they have returning talent in Kyson Brown. He is someone who played a pretty big role for them late in the season. Jordan Tyson, as long as he can stay healthy, led the team in receiving this year. He is going to be a big-time threat downfield. They bring in Jalen Moss from the transfer portal from Fresno State. You also bring in, and this was honestly a really interesting addition, Kanye Udo from Army. You don't see a lot of Army players, Navy players, Air Force players hit the transfer portal and go to a Power 4 program. Kanye Udo has the ability to be a starter for them and figures to be a nice 1-2 punch with Kyson Brown. The defense obviously has certain things to figure out. They have to replace certain players. Losing Shamari Simmons was a big one, but Xavier Alford is back. Keyshawn Elliott, two natural playmakers for Arizona State. Feels like they're in a good position. When I first put this list together, Alabama was honestly the toughest team to figure out because while I want to give them credit for being Alabama, I also don't want to be biased towards a team that just isn't the same than it once was. This is not a team under Nick Saban anymore. It's not a team that is the juggernaut that it once was, but this is still a really good team, and I think that you still have to give them credit. Now, I had them much lower initially. I moved them up because the more I look at it, I feel like they're in a pretty good position. A lot of that is going to be determined by what Austin Mack can do, how good he can be in this offense. That is going to be a big key for this team. If he does not play well, Alabama is going to struggle a lot. But if he plays really well, not only can this offense play really at a high level, Ryan Williams is going to be one of the best players in college football statistically. You also brought in Isaiah Horton. That is a good 1-2 punch, very underrated addition for the Alabama Crimson Tide. Jam Miller is officially the go-to guy at running back. We'll see if Draylen Washington comes in from Louisiana. Can he do anything? I think that this is a team that has a lot of potential, but we'll see what that means. They went 9-4 in 2024. You're hoping that improves if you're an Alabama fan, but we will see. Deontay Lawson decided to come back. That was really exciting for this team. That's a leader in that defensive group. Xavier Brown is also a corner to keep an eye on. Again, this is a group that has some big-time questions, but you also have a lot of talent to answer some of those questions. The question is going to be, can that group step up in a big way? Losing Jalen Milroe at quarterback is obviously going to be a focus for a lot of people. Is Austin Mack the real deal? If the answer is yes, you feel like Alabama's in good hands. One of the hotter teams coming to the end of 2024 was the South Carolina Gamecocks, and they are looking to build that momentum into another really exciting season in 2025. Lenore Sellers returns for that offense. If he takes a step forward, watch out for this offense. This is going to be a really exciting offense, a really exciting unit, and he could be a potential Heisman candidate if all things go well. Nick Harbor and Mazeo Bennett are going to be the two wide receivers he looks to the most. They are really talented. Harbor obviously has that speed, and I think that he silenced a few doubters about if he can be a consistent wide receiver. You'd obviously like to see him take another step in his development as well. The defense loses some key pieces. You lose TJ Sanders, Kyle Kennard, Tonka Hemingway, but Dylan Stewart is the real deal. As long as he can keep his head in the right place and not, get certain penalties and whatnot, this is a guy that can be electric. You'd like to see him add more weight to his frame. He is just learning the position, though. He is just learning how to win at the college level, and he's already had that taste of success. He is someone who's going to be an absolute star for this team. Same with Jalen Kilgore. We don't talk about his season enough. 5 interceptions, absolutely phenomenal. A player that is really honestly flying under the radar, not really being talked about a ton, but someone who deserves a lot of love for what he did. when you look at who they brought in, bringing in Aaron Nolan was kind of an underrated addition. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. Jordan Dingle could be a really interesting piece at the tight end position as well. You bring in a couple of transfers on the defensive side of the ball. You didn't need a ton to replace. The defensive line was probably the biggest area that they felt they needed to replace, but you also see that they didn't add a ton of talent from the transfer portal. So you're going to see that this defensive line has the talent in that room already. I think that Shane Beamer's staff feels like they're in a good position, and Dylan Stewart is obviously one of the reasons why. SMU obviously didn't end the season how they wanted. They end the season with 2 consecutive losses, losing in the ACC championship game and then losing on the road in the college football playoff. But if you're Rhett Lashlee, you feel pretty good about where you're at. Kevin Jennings was a young player who is ready to show that he can take things to the next level. He can take his game to the next level, develop as a passer, and you saw some really good things for him in 2024. Over 3,200 yards, 23 touchdowns. You'd like to see him reduce those interceptions, make some smarter decisions, maybe get a little bit more power in his frame that he can make some more difficult throws and get the out routes and whatnot, make those a little bit easier. He shouldn't have too much concern, though, with the talent he has returning. LJ Johnson will be a good running back. Lost a lot of depth in the running back room, but LJ Johnson is a really exciting player who could take a bigger role. You also added Chris Johnson Jr. from Miami. Again, the Miami to SMU connection continues. Chris Johnson Jr.'s speed in Rhett Lashlee's offense and also as a returner is going to be electric. That's going to be fun. I'm excited to see how they utilize him and how they get him involved. Jordan Hudson and RJ Maryland are back. Jordan Hudson, as long as, again, another guy that we're talking about keeping your head cool. If Jordan Hudson can focus on playing football and not the extracurriculars, I think that you're looking at a guy who can be a really big-time player for this team. He can be one of the best wide receivers in college football. You just have to get him to that point. RJ Maryland lost after 7 games due to injury. I think that was a huge loss for this team, but it also made them focus on other players. They needed other guys to step up, and they got that. Now RJ Maryland's coming back. He is someone who is a big-time player, more of kind of that pass-catching tight end, really, than anything, but he is someone who's going to make a big-time impact on this team. The defense has plenty of talent to replace. There's a lot of concerns on that side of the ball in terms of who's going to step up and play, specifically on the defensive line and at linebacker. Kobe Wilson was a big-time loss. But you have Amon Moses and Isaiah Nwokobia coming back, so you feel pretty good about the back end of things. You feel like you're in a good position there. And I think, honestly, you brought in a couple players in the transfer portal that will make things a little bit less concerning if you're SMU. But again, you have some work to do. You maybe don't have the unknown factor of surrounding your team, so that might be difficult to overcome, but SMU has plenty of talent to make another run next year. A lot of Florida's hype is surrounded by DJ Lagway. If DJ Lagway takes that step that everyone expects him to, and he is truly the real deal, then Florida is going to be one of the most dangerous teams in the SEC. Jaden Bott is always coming back, so he's a really hard runner, a very physical runner that's going to be fun to watch as well. A good tandem to put with Lagway. You also have Trey Wilson coming back. You bring in J. Michael Sturdivant. That's a very good, underrated addition, honestly, at the wide receiver position. The defense also saw some players return that helps a ton. Caleb Banks is one of them. Probably could have been a first-round pick to some, but he decides to come back for another year. Tyree Sapp joins him on the defensive line as well. The defense is going to have to sort some things out, again, and really both sides, but this schedule was brutal. The one thing we talked about with Florida this year was the schedule was so bad, the schedule was so tough for Florida, and they managed to find a way to be successful and win 8 ball games. They found a way to do that, and Billy Napier probably got a lot of people off his back. And you're looking at taking the next step. You obviously have to win, around those 8 games again, but this is a team that definitely can do that. Baylor's a very underrated team. I think that they played well towards the end of the season, and Dave Aranda has done a lot of good things to get the hot seat out of, in his name, not synonymous anymore. An 8-5 year was a solid year, and the emergence of Sawyer Robinson, I think, was a huge way to get those people off of his back. And again, you had DeQuan Finn coming in. You felt like he was going to be the answer. He gets hurt. Sawyer Robinson comes in. And honestly, this staff and Baylor did a really good job of keeping him around. He probably could have gone to a number of other Power 4 schools, but he stays with Baylor. And this is going to be one of the best offenses in the Big 12. When you look at Bryson Washington is coming back, Dawson Pendergrass is back as well. So that's a group that came, a tandem, I should say, that rushed for over 1,600 yards and 18 touchdowns. That's a group that's going to be really fun running the football once again. The passing attack feels like it's good in good hands with Robertson. Josh Cameron also returns. You bring in Kobe Prentice from Alabama in the transfer portal. So you feel like you're in a good position if you're Baylor. It's going to be hard to reset those expectations because they kind of were an underdog coming into the season last year. They won't be that in 2025. The defense, we'll see what happens with the defense. This is a defense that obviously needs to take a step back or forward, and Dave Aranda is one of those players or guys that you look at what he needs to do. He is the defensive mind of a head coach, and he needs to figure out how does this defense contribute a little bit more. The offense obviously is in good hands, but the defense obviously is one of those groups that needs to step up. Keaton Thomas returns after a big year, 114 tackles, 7 tackles for loss. You bring in Travion Barnes from Florida International. That's a guy who is a tackling machine. We'll see if that levels up this defense, but again, if you can take a step forward as a defense, Baylor is going to be a really dangerous team, maybe even a playoff team. Tennessee goes back to the drawing board. It was not the college football playoff experience that they wanted. Josh Heupel's offense has some things to sort out. The defense has a number of players that they need to replace. That being said, this feels like it's a group that's still in good hands. And obviously everything is centered around Nico Iamaleava. He is going to have to take a step forward. We saw some really good things from him, but we also saw him struggle at times. And this is a team that can't afford their quarterback to struggle like he did. Some of it's not on him, but also it all starts with him. And if he can find a way to take a step forward and develop more as a passer and make some different kinds of throws that he didn't make in 2024, this offense feels like it's in good hands. Losing Dylan Sampson was obviously a huge loss for this team. You obviously knew he was going to go to the NFL, but Deshaun Bishop is a very good back. I don't think a lot of people know his name yet because Dylan Sampson stole the show, but Deshaun Bishop showed some really good flashes in 2024. The offensive passing attack feels like it's in good hands too. Chris Brazzell is coming back after transferring in from Tulane last year. He had 333 yards and 2 touchdowns. Mike Matthews is a former 5-star that everyone's really excited about. You know, maybe not ready for the spotlight last year, but another offseason gives these wide receivers times to show what they can do. You bring in Amari Jefferson from Alabama. Maybe that's an addition that helps as well. The defense, like I said, though, the defensive line has a lot to replace. That's going to be difficult, but you also have really exciting talent behind them. Arion Carter is a tackling machine. He is someone who is ready to take a step next year as well. Jerron McCoy is one of the better corners in college football. Got kind of a wake-up call against Ohio State, but that also is good experience. He knows what he needs to do to take his game to the next level. So while everyone was kind of dogging him for his play in that game, that's something that he can learn from and be better in 2025. The Cinderella of the year, the Boise State Broncos, won't have the main feature of the reason why people paid attention to them so much, which is Ashton Jeanty, but this is a team that returns a ton of talent. There are a ton of players that are coming back for Boise State. Maddox Madsen is going to lead the way once again. Sire Gaines and a really deep running back room are going to be really interesting to watch as well. There's still talk about Cam Camper and Latrell Gaples potentially coming back. As I'm recording this right now, neither of them are on the roster, so we'll see what happens with that. But that being said, Matt Lauder does return. He is a really reliable tight end, a very good playmaker that they utilize quite a bit. He is someone that could have a big year in 2024 or 25. He had a pretty decent year for this Boise State team. Honestly, kind of surprised that he is back. The defense has to play better, plain and simple. They have the talent to do it, and I think that if you're looking at a group that has to get better play, it's Boise State defense. I think Jaden Virgin Morgan has the ability to be an absolute monster for Boise State. You also brought in talent like Malachi Williams, Demetrius Freeney in the cornerback position. Ty Benefield comes back for this team as well. So there's definitely returning talent that you can lean on. And there's definitely a lot of returning talent that are going to make this group really good. But can you take that next step, and who replaces Ashton Jeanty is probably the biggest question of any team coming into the 2025 season. BYU could make that dark horse run again. I think that they had a good start to their 2024 season and then honestly kind of fell off the face of the earth a little bit. Still finished 11-2. And when I say fall off the face, I think that a lot of people stop paying attention to them at a certain point. But this is a group that, at least to me, it feels like they're coming into the season where people are downing them once again. Jake Retzlaff is ready to make a huge statement in 2025. Almost 3,000 yards as his first year as a starter, 20 touchdowns. He brings back a good core of offensive talent. LJ Martin is one of the best and most physical running backs in college football. I think he's ready for a monster year now that he has less depth behind him. Chase Roberts, one of the better wide receivers in the Big 12, he is back for more, and that's a good trio to have. You brought in Carson Ryan from the transfer portal from Utah as well. Jack Kelly has a future in the NFL at linebacker. We'll see how he plays in 2025. Isaiah Glasker is another guy on the defensive side of the ball. You feel pretty good about BYU. They have the right conference that they need to be in. They have the ability to win it. It's just that you can't come up short in some of the bigger games. And this is a conference that some teams are going to take a step back, but it's going to be some familiar faces near the top, and BYU is definitely going to be one of those teams. Another one of those teams is the Kansas State Wildcats, and this is a team that returns a good core as well offensively. Avery Johnson has to figure out a way to develop as a passer. He has to take a step forward in that regard. Still threw for over 2,700 yards and 25 touchdowns in 2024. He doesn't have DJ Giddens, but Dylan Edwards is back. You also bring in Gabe Ervin from Nebraska, so you feel like you have a pretty good tandem in the backfield as well. They also bring in a number of wide receivers as well as return Jace Brown. Jace Brown is honestly one of the best wide receivers in college football that a lot of people aren't talking about. 17.5 yards per catch. They also bring Jerand Bradley from Boston College. They bring in Caleb Medford from New Mexico. Those are two very underrated additions. Bradley has experience at Texas Tech as well, so he's very familiar with the Big 12 and what's expected of him. The defense really is where things are going to determine how successful they are, honestly. A big part of it is Avery Johnson, but this defense needs to play better than it did last year. You bring back Austin Romaine and Desmond Purnell. That's a good group at linebacker. Gunnar Maldonado is one of the more underrated additions on the defensive side of the ball. Only played 4 games for the Wildcats at Arizona, and he is looking to have another big year like he did 2 years ago. If Austin Simmons proves to be the real deal, then Ole Miss should be much higher than I have them right now. But the fact that they lost so much talent, including their quarterback in Jackson Dart, means that we're going to wait and see on this team. This is a team that has plenty of talent, and as usual, Lane Kiffin has just hammered the transfer portal. But this is a group that has some unproven players that need to step up. Caden Lee had a big year, 874 yards and 2 touchdowns. They also bring in Luke Haas, and you're feeling like you're in a good position to continue your success. Dejon Stribling comes in from Oklahoma State, so they did a good job of bringing in potential starters. It's just a matter of, can you repeat what you did in 2024? I think that a lot of that centers around Austin Simmons and what he can do. They're very high on him. They like what he can do. They like his talent. It just might take a little bit of time to get everything sorted out. The defense has certain players that need to step up. The defensive line feels like it's going to be the strength of this group, but we will see what happens there. Suntarine Perkins, very exciting player. Very exciting if you're an Ole Miss fan, and a guy who's going to be very disruptive for this team. Georgia Tech had quite the interesting year. You start the year upsetting number 10 Florida State, which is kind of a funny ranking now that the season has played out. And you also almost stunned Georgia at the end of the year. This is a team that returns Haynes King and Jamal Haynes. That's a great tandem for any team, and they are both back. And that's a group that only figures to take a step forward. And when you look at what this team has done, I think the play calling is very good. They have their quarterback and their running back. Malik Rutherford is also back. You lost Eric Singleton, so that's kind of hurts. But this is an offense that should be just as good, if not better, than it was in 2024. Same with the defense. Kyle Efford is one of those easy to cheer for guys, the neck roll linebacker who is just an absolute lunatic on the field sometimes, plays the game tremendously hard, and does not quit. He is someone who is a good leader and someone who's going to have a big-time impact once again. The defensive line feels like it's in good hands. Jordan Vandenberg is back. AJ Hoffler comes in from the transfer portal, and you feel like you did a good job in the transfer portal as well. On the offensive side of the ball, in addition to Malik Rutherford, Eric Rivers was a good addition from Florida International. DeBron Gatling coming in from South Carolina. We'll see if he can be a contributor as well. We talked about Hoffler. Melvin Jordan's a very underrated linebacker addition. Joining him with effort, that feels like it's a good position for Georgia Tech to be in, and they feel like they can compete once again in the ACC. Iowa State came close to winning the Big 12 until they ran into Arizona State and that offense. It obviously did not go well for them in that game, but this is a team that is right there and they return a ton of talent. Now, someone is going to have to replace both Well and Higgins. They bring in Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend from the transfer portal. We'll see if that helps. The rushing attack figures to be in a good spot with Carson Hansen and Abu Sama coming back. Rocco Becht returning, though, is probably the biggest return for this team. It doesn't matter who's going to catch the ball or run the football if your quarterback doesn't play well, especially for Iowa State, a team that needs good quarterback play to pull off some upsets and win 11 football games. Having Rocco Becht is huge. 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns. I think that he's in store for an even better year as long as he can figure out the chemistry with his wide receivers. Losing Noel and Higgins, we obviously knew that probably was going to happen, but now you have a chance to have new guys step up. The defense loses some players on the back end of the defense. The safety positions lose a couple players, but you have Jontez Williams coming back. The defensive line should be interesting to watch. Losing Tyler Andim was probably a very difficult. It's a tough pill to swallow, but you have J.R. Singleton coming back, and honestly, this is a group that should be still pretty good in 2025. Michigan is back in the top 25, and it's going to be hinged on the offense. A lot of this is determined by if the offense can actually be competent. And I think that outside of running the football and Kalel Mullins at times, really Kalel Mullins and Colston Loveland, outside of that, this offense was not very good. It was not a good group, and a lot of it had to do with the quarterback position. We'll see what happens. We'll see. I like Mikey Keene. I'm a big fan of him, but I don't know if he is going to be able to do exactly what they need. The one thing I will say is that he's good on the run when he needs to throw, and that's something that Michigan didn't quite have the ability to do. He's a good passer. He's mobile. He can throw on the run. So maybe that's something that he's not going to be an elite quarterback by any means, but that could be exactly what this team needs. Getting Justice Haynes from Alabama, that was a huge addition. We'll see what the passing attack looks like. That's going to be probably the biggest key, honestly, and you don't have Colston Loveland. So TBD on that, but having Justice Haynes and Mikey Keene were two of the bigger additions for any team in the Big Ten. The defense is going to be just as good. I don't really care who you lose. You're going to lose Mason Graham. You're going to lose Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson. You will lose some big-time talent, but Michigan feels like they reload every single year. Derek Moore, Ernest Hausman, Jayshon Barman. You look at Makari Page on the back end. They feel like they're in a good position. They have a good core. They obviously need certain players to step up and replace the talent that's leaving, but this is a team that is motivated. They have the win against Ohio State once again, and they are a team that is kind of counted out right now because of the struggles they've had, and Sharon Moore has a lot of work to do, but this feels like a team that could surprise some people next year. Another team that's a sleeper team, Texas Tech. Texas Tech is, honestly, when you look at their numbers, right back to the original Texas Tech days, the Mike Leach days. You're putting up big numbers, you're putting up a ton of yards, and your defense is doing absolutely nothing. And honestly, that's what Texas Tech was last year. And this is a group that could be really fun to watch, though. Baron Morton is one of the better quarterbacks that you probably don't know. He also gets Coy Eakin and Caleb Douglas back at wide receiver. You bring in Quinton Joyner from the transfer portal, and this is a group that has a ton of potential in 2025. You look at what they can do offensively, you feel like you're in good hands. Now, defensively, you bring back Jacob Rodriguez, Chapman Lewis. There's plenty of things to sort out on the defensive side of the ball, so you feel like you're in a position where certain things need to be answered, but you also did a good job of adding talent from the transfer portal, specifically Lee Hunter and safety Cole Wisniewski from NDSU, the former All-American. So you bring in talent that could fix the defense. Again, we talk about this every year. People, I think, sometimes think that your defense needs to go from terrible to elite for you to make any progress. Texas Tech is a 10-win team if their offense goes from where they were to 80th or 70th. Just getting that improvement with your offense staying the same puts you in a way better position to win football games, potentially win the Big 12, and make a run at the college football playoff. And the final team we'll talk about today is Washington. And Washington is in a good position with Jedd Fisch. You feel like you are excited with what you saw from Demon Williams. Will Rogers obviously played pretty much the entire year. Demon Williams in the bowl game, obviously you don't want to take too much from the bowl game, but you knew he had talent, and he showed you exactly why. Jonah Coleman, surprisingly, is coming back. That's a good player to have for a new quarterback in the backfield. Denzel Boston is going to be a really interesting player to watch at the wide receiver position. The defense brings in some transfer portal players that are familiar with Jedd Fisch from his time in Arizona, in Jacob Manu, Takario Davis, Tai Uiagalelei, another Uiagalelei in college football. This is a group that feels like they're in a good position. The defense had some really exciting things happen for them in 2024. And if they can do that again and make some improvements both offensively and defensively, and if Demon Williams is the real deal, you feel like Washington could surprise a lot of people this year.